back to our previous day's topic. Let me just say a word about the assignments that you all handed in. Okay, most people seem to get a good feel of what to do with these melodic development techniques. Let me just make a couple of brief comments about some of the ones that there might have been some slight confusion. Okay, I think most things seemed like they were pretty clear, but here are the ones that I noticed there was a little bit of confusion on. Okay, change of mode. Let me just explain change of mode. So the original motive was okay, that was the motive. Da, 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 da. Okay, is this major or minor?
Major.
Minor. Would you all agree, is it major?
It's minor.
It's minor, okay? This is in the key of A minor. If you were to put it in solfege, now maybe it's a little bit short to be able to hear that, but me, re, mi, do, okay? If you know the song Carol of the Bells, you might realize that's a minor key song, right? This. It's minor. So change of mode means to go to the opposite. If you have a motive that's in the major mode, to rewrite it in the minor mode, or in this case, if it's in the minor mode, you're supposed to rewrite it in the major mode. Okay, so change of mode does not mean that you change the key to some other minor key. Okay, it actually means that you have to, change of mode is a little bit different than change of key. And usually when we change the mode, we keep the tonic the same. That's generally how it works. So that would mean like going from A minor to A major. Okay, now some people went to A flat major because I think you were thinking we got to start on the same pitch and you just added. Okay, I accepted that. I think that's fine. Okay, that is the change of mode. So that would be the original and would be the change of mode. Okay, others of you added a C sharp. Okay, this is what I would have thought to do more is, you know, so seeing that A is my do, I keep the do the same instead of okay, that would be the most, to me, the most obvious way to write the change of mode, but I would accept A flat. Okay, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to change it to some other minor key, because that's not really a change of mode. It would be a change of key. Change of key means changing the tonic. Change of mode means staying in the same tonic, but going from major or minor, from major to minor or minor to major. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
I trust it's clear if there are no questions. All right, then inversion, let me just give you an example of inversion. You know, we want to write a true inversion of this motive. We need to change the direction of all the intervals, not just one. So many of you did that. Some changed some of the directions, like for example, okay, so start here, go up, and then down. Okay, and then somewhat like back down to A. Okay, now this part is inverted. Down, up, down. Okay, but then this part should also go in the opposite direction. So if this is down a third, we want to end by going up a third. Okay, so if you didn't write a complete inversion, I did put a little bit for that, because that would be the true inversion of this motive. Okay, now in real life, there are times when composers don't completely invert a motive, when they might just do a partial inversion, where some notes are inverted or where some notes, the intervals change. Okay, but for the purpose of this exercise, I wanted you to write a complete inversion. So becomes, all right, any other questions from this assignment? I think that was the main things I wanted to go over. Most other things were relatively clear. Any questions? Okay, I did send you back your assignments. I trust most of you have seen that.
Ma'am,
Yes.
in the augmentation and diminution, would you prefer that we change even the time signature, or would you notate the new time signature, or?
It doesn't really matter to me because, again, we don't really know, there's not enough information given to know, have we actually changed the time signature? Actually, probably, you know, in real music, when you have augmentation or diminution, most of the time the time signature doesn't change. It's that in, you know, let's say it's, okay, this would be 3/4. You know, if you did change the time signature, that's fine. But in real music, most of the time when we use augmentation or diminution, there wouldn't be a change of time signature. So if you didn't change the time signature, that's fine. So let's say this was 3/4. I don't think I even gave you a time signature for this motive. Okay, if I was going to write this in augmentation, okay, I think a lot of people just did this, which is fine. Okay, it would take up 2 measures. Yeah, okay. If you were to write it in diminution, that would be 1/8 and 2/16. Okay, and that would only be half a measure. If you wanted to complete the measure, you could either write some more notes. If you don't want to write more notes, that's how you would complete the measure. Da, 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 da. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's probably more realistic in terms of, it's not very often that we would actually see a change of time signature, but I wasn't too particular with this, as long as you got the point of what augmentation and diminution means.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Okay, so just sort of hold this in the back of your minds. We will keep seeing some of these development techniques come up in other forms that we study. But now we are moving on to talking about harmony. And we started that discussion yesterday. We had a nice little discussion about what is the purpose of harmony. And we talked about things like enhancing the texture and creating, you know, more beauty, complexity. There was a lot of different words that came up. And then the other thing that we talked about and we started looking at toward the end of class was the idea that harmony provides direction to the music, that we always have a goal somewhere where we're going with tonal music, and that goal, of course, is the tonic. So our goal in a piece of music is to get back to the tonic. We also looked at this storyline, what I call the storyline of music, where we start with the tonic, then we have a departure from the tonic, and usually the way we get back to the tonic is through the dominant chord. It's pretty much the only way we get back to the tonic. So we often have this tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic plan. Okay, now within that, we sometimes have different Roman numerals, okay, but we can categorize all of our Roman numerals into tonic category chords, predominant category chords, dominant category chords. So rather than going through all that we went through last time with, okay, which chords go into which category, let's look at another example of how this plays out in real music, this tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic pattern. So let me show you something here. Okay, so this is like a hymn. Okay, fairly simple. And I want us to look at this first, I guess it's 8 measures here. Okay, which I would say is 2 phrases. We're going to be talking about phrases a little bit later today. But I'm going to play through these, and then I want us to do first a quick Roman numeral analysis, and then I want us to look for this storyline, this tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic. So listen first, then we'll ask you to help me do the Roman numeral analysis. Then we'll look for the storyline. All right. Just gonna play up till there. Okay, so we're in the key of F major. Okay, so let's look at this first phrase. Now, remember that not all phrases have predominant. Sometimes we go straight tonic, dominant, tonic, something like that. But many times we do have predominant. Okay, so this is F major, so we have one chord, and that one goes all the way through the first two measures. Okay, not very exciting, but that's okay. All right, can somebody tell me what Roman numerals you would give to the next three chords?
Ma'am, 5, 5, 7 to 1.
Okay, I'm sorry, what was the first one that you said? What's this one?
I don't know, I got a 5.
Okay, this one is actually
2.
yeah, okay, it's a little bit unclear because there's no, it's an incomplete chord. Okay, I think what this actually is 164. That's what it sounds like. Now there's no F in it, but it has the sound of, if I were to put an F somewhere in it. Okay, I'll put that in parentheses because this one's a little less clear. Okay, and then Viva, tell us about this one.
5, 7.
5, 7. And this one?
1.
1. Okay, so here's our first cadence. So we have 1, and then 164. This is cadential 6/4. Okay, again, I realize it's incomplete, but that's what it sounds like. That is not really, now often we see that before the dominant, we think, oh, predominant. You can almost think that cadential 6/4 is so close to the dominant that it's almost part of the dominant. I would almost consider it to be part of dominant more than predominant, okay, because it's got the same bass note as the dominant, and it's got the same, doubled note as the dominant, and then the two other pitches just slide down to the notes of the dominant chord, is usually how this works. Okay, so we could consider all of this dominant. So do we have any predominant chord in this phrase? Okay, if we don't count this as predominant, we have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then 164, 5, 7, 1. No predominant.
No, ma'am.
No. So that's okay. Okay, that doesn't always happen. So we could say all of this is tonic. I'm just gonna, and then this is dominant and tonic. Okay, now we've still gotten back to our tonic at the end of our phrase. Okay. All right, let's look at the next phrase though. Okay, so this is 1. Okay, what is the next chord? Kavitoli, can you give us a Roman numeral for the next chord?
D, F, 6, ma'am.
6. Okay, good. Now we'll go back and put this into categories, which are tonic category and predominant and dominant. But for now, let's just stick with Roman numerals. Okay, now the next chord, I think that this one is a non-chord tone, so I'm going to circle it. You don't have to count this in the chord. Somebody tell me about the next two chords because they're very similar. Give you a minute to think about it. Be somebody who hasn't answered yet today. Kenneth, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what are these two chords?
Ma'am, you said don't look at the A over there.
Yes, let's not count the A. I think this is like a suspension. It's from held over from the previous chord. It's a non-chord tone, I think.
The second one is a 2.
The second one.
The first one, at first, it looked like it was a 4/7 when I looked at the A, but is it just an incomplete 4 chord now?
Okay, well, if we don't have the A, what are the notes that are remaining? There's a B flat, there's a D, there's a G.
Oh, and the G as well.
Yes,
Then
you can count the G, sorry, yeah.
so it's a 5/6.
Okay, so we have G, B flat,
So
G.
G6.
Wait, say that one more time.
The second chord in first inversion.
There we go, yes, 2, 6. And then you said the next one is 2. All right, so that's why I said they were very similar. Same chord, different inversion. So we go from 2, 6 to 2. All right, now we can almost guess what's going to come next because 2 pretty much is always followed by something. So who would like to tell about the next 3 chords? Very common thing that's happening. Shalyn, are you there? Okay, or Sukwali?
Yes.
Yeah, what are these next 3 chords? Or if you want to just tell one, what's the next chord?
So 1, ma'am.
1 and what inversion?
6, 4.
What inversion? F, A, C with F in the bass would be 1, 6, 4. Right? And then what's the next chord? You can consider all of these notes. Who else is here who hasn't answered? Lotung Benny,
Yes, ma'am.
what is the next chord? This one.
So there C, G, B, and D. So, E, G.
So we have C, E, G, and B flat. What would that
Is
be?
it E, G, B? C, G, B, and A.
And we're in the key of F.
E, G, B, C, C, E, G, and B. C, E, G, and B.
Yes. So that would be
So, 5.
okay, 5, 7 specifically, yes. Okay, and then of course 5, 7 here resolves to 1. Okay, now let's look at this second phrase here. Do you see here the tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic pattern? Okay, which chords would go in the tonic category? Anyone?
1 and 6.
1 and 6, thank you, Ruben. Okay, so we have 1 and 6. Remember that 6 often prolongs the tonic, okay, because it has 2 notes in common with the tonic. So now, we could have just harmonized this. Okay, I could have just played 2 1 chords there, but instead of that, I added some variation by prolonging the tonic. Sounds a little bit more interesting there. Okay, and then 2 is what category of chord?
Predominant.
Predominant.
Predominant, thank you. So we have our predominant here. Okay, and then we already said that 1, 6, 4 kind of goes along with dominant. So I'm going to count it in the dominant category. Dominant and tonic. So here's our storyline. 1, 6, now we have predominant. Now dominant. And you can already hear when you get to this, you can almost feel the tonic come up. Okay, so I just wanted to give you one more example of how this storyline, now you'll find this many places in music. This is the normal storyline that we follow. It's a little bit like these, Bollywood dramas. They all have the same story, right? There's a couple that wants to get married and the father is against it because the girl is from some other place and blah, 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 right? It's like all the same story, just variations on it. Okay, it's a little bit like that with tonal music. I'm not saying that tonal music is boring. There's a lot of variation. But the basic storyline is generally the same.
Ma'am,
Yes.
so on the second line, first measure, you said just to consider the G as a part of the chord. So how do we know when to use what chord, what tones for the chord during analysis? Because the chord right after that, we're looking at both the notes, both the quarter notes on the soprano. So
Okay, you're talking about these chords right here?
yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So
so why did I not count this note? But here I counted both the notes.
Yes, and when to know, when not to count a note.
Okay, that's a good question. I'll answer that because even though it's not directly connected, this is a good thing to think about. Okay, so the way I would look at this is, if I look at these notes, all of these notes here on this beat, okay, this is one beat, it's 2-2. So if I look at all of the notes on this beat, it's G, B flat, D, A. Okay, is there any chord that has all 4 of those notes? G, B flat, D, and A?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay, so that automatically tells me this can't all be part of the same chord. So then my question is, okay, which note does not belong? So if I try to sort of form a triad out of those notes, okay, if I count the A there, okay, it would be B flat, D, A. Now that could be a part of an incomplete 7th chord. Or if I leave the A out and say, okay, G is part of the chord, then that would be G, B flat, D. Okay, and that actually is a little bit more logical. Now, again, some of these things can be analyzed in different ways. If you called this an incomplete 4-7 chord and call this a non-chord tone, okay, I would say that's not an unreasonable analysis. But I think the other thing is then, okay, if this A is a non-chord tone, what is it? Well, there was an A right here, and then it resolves down here. Okay, that would be a suspension. That's a very, and this would be a 7-6 suspension. So I could even very clearly name that. So basically what I look at is first, and for example here, well, all of these notes are part of one chord, so I don't even have to worry about, is there a non-chord tone? So what I look at when I look at a group of notes that doesn't all fit into one chord, I think which one doesn't belong? And then out of that, I try to make the most reasonable analysis of, okay, which one doesn't belong? If it doesn't belong, what kind of non-chord tone is it? Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Just a lot of things to look at.
There are a lot of things to look at. Okay. All right, good. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, then I want to do something very small in a breakout room again. So I have a question for you. I'm going to split you again into like 3 groups. Okay, and this is the question I want you to answer. Okay, it's a very simple question, so I don't think I need to write it on the board. The question is, what is a phrase? Everyone get the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what is a phrase? So what makes something a phrase? How do you know that something is a phrase? So I would just want you to discuss that in your groups for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. Then I will close the groups once I think you've had enough time to discuss it, and we'll talk about it and go from there. All right. Breakout rooms. Oh, I'm not the host. Kenneth, can you make me the host?
Yes, I'm sorry, ma'am. The power just went out, so kind of got stuck.
Like, okay.
Um,
All right, now I can enable breakout rooms. Okay, so you'll be in 3 rooms and just talking within your group about what is a phrase. Then I'll ask each group to give me some answers and we'll discuss. Okay, we are back now. Let's go backwards today. Okay, the last shall be first, right? So group 3, why don't you go first? When someone from group 3 like to tell us, what did you talk about? What is a phrase? What makes something a phrase?
We got 2 points.
Okay,
It's a musical sentence.
musical sentence. Okay, by the way, we are talking about musical phrases. I assumed you all knew that. Not talking about in language. Phrase is something different. Okay, musical sentence. I'm just going to put your thoughts up on the board and then we'll discuss further. And what was your other point?
The second one is phrase is a group of melodic line.
Group of melodic line.
Melodic line.
Okay. Thank you. Group 3. Group 2. Anything, what did you discuss or anything you want to add to this?
Yes, ma'am. In English, we discussed that a phrase could be a complete unit within a sentence that makes sense to us. And in musical terms, we discussed that in relation to music that doesn't have lyrics, like instrumental music, a phrase could be indicated by things like markings and cadences. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we discussed.
Okay, very good. Markings and cadences. Okay, so how do you know, when you're singing, you can kind of tell by where the words come to an ending point. Okay, that must be the end of the phrase. If it's instrumental, how do you know where it ends? Okay, cadences, that's an important point. I'm going to put that up on the board. We'll talk about that a little bit. All right, group 1. Anyone from group 1 want to share? If you didn't have anything new, that's okay. Just tell us something. What did you talk about?
We spoke about like the antecedent and consequent, right, cadences,
And
which towards
say
the
that again?
antecedent and consequent cadences at the end of the
Consequent. Okay, all right.
at
That
the,
is a term. Do you want to explain what you mean by that? That's a term that's related to phrases. We will be.
yes, so like antecedent is like it's basically a cadence which is not complete, like it won't be a complete cadence and it can be repeated again, like and then consequent is a complete cadence where the phrase ends completely.
Okay, all right. So this actually has to do with how two phrases are related to each other. If we have two phrases, one that ends with a less conclusive cadence or a weaker cadence, and
Yes.
the other one ends with a stronger cadence, that we call antecedent and consequent. we'll get to that. Anything else that you guys discussed?
A phrase, like it's a musical piece that it can make sense of its own. Like even if it's played alone, it will make musical sense.
Okay.
I'm not getting that.
Makes sense as a unit by itself.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm just gonna put unit here. I don't know if that's the best way to summarize what you're saying, but I'm just gonna put that here. Okay, does anyone want to add anything to this list that you talked about or that came to your mind as we were going through this? Okay, if not, that's fine. Good thoughts here. Okay, let me give you a few points that that may also help you think about how do you know what's a phrase when you're looking at a piece of music. Okay, here's 3 characteristics of a phrase, and I'm just going to put them down and then we'll talk about what it actually means, or we'll look at an example. So one is that there has to be harmonic motion. What does that mean? It'll make more sense, I think, when we look at an example, but it basically means the harmony has to change. It has to go somewhere. If we stay on one harmony the whole time, we really can't call that a phrase. Okay, a phrase always has to have some direction. There has to be some harmonic motion, some change of harmony. The second point was brought up by one of our groups here, that it ends with a cadence. Okay, that means that if you have a 2 chord or something, that's never going to be the end of a phrase because we don't have any cadences that end with a 2 chord. Okay, what are the different cadences that you know? Just as a very quick aside, what are some of the most common types of cadences?
Authentic cadence.
Authentic. Okay, that means something that ends with a 1 chord. We have perfect authentic and imperfect authentic. PAC, IAC. Okay, if it's root position 5 and 1 and the soprano ends on do, that's perfect authentic. If one of the chords is in inversion or if the soprano does not end on do, it's imperfect authentic. Okay, so that's all authentic. What else? Another cadence. Anyone?
Deceptive.
Deceptive cadence. Okay, that's 5 going to 6, where 6 is acting as a substitute for a 1 chord. Okay, you can call that DC. 2 more common cadences.
Half cadence.
Half cadence. Half cadence is anything that ends with a 5 chord. And what's the one that's 4-1?
Plagal.
cadence.
Plagal cadence. Okay, so these are just our different cadence types. I think you all know about that. Okay, one more characteristic of a phrase. So we have harmonic motion, it ends with a cadence. And okay, this is not true of every phrase, but it's generally true, is that we usually come to let's say, a rhythmic resting point. Okay, this is where we feel this, and even if you knew nothing about harmony, if you were completely a non-musician, you would feel like you came to the end of a phrase when you get to like a long note or a rest or something that sort of marks off the end of a phrase rhythmically. Now, that doesn't mean that if there is no resting point that it's not the end of a phrase. This happens a lot in Baroque music, Bach music, where the phrases just sort of overlap with each other and there's no real resting point. That's why it's hard to kind of tell in Baroque music where the end of a phrase is. Okay, but generally, having a rhythmic resting point also is a characteristic of a phrase. Okay, now, how are we doing on time? Okay, let me show you something. We'll look at something very simple here. Okay, here is a very sophisticated piece of music. right, I hope you can all see that. Let me make this slightly larger. Okay, so I'm gonna play this very sophisticated piece of music. And I want you to tell me, how many phrases is this? Probably put some clues up there that I shouldn't have put up. Oh well. You tell me, how many phrases is this? How many phrases?
Two.
I'm sorry, your voice is breaking. Say that one more time.
Two.
Two.
Two. Okay, I'm hearing two. Anyone want to disagree? Okay, it looks like we all agree. Why two? Okay, now let me play two measures for you, the first two bars. Tell me why or that is or is not a phrase.
Ma'am, is it because the harmony is just there, not moving?
Okay, very good. So we said goes back to what I wrote on the board, that one of the characteristics of a phrase is that there has to be some harmonic motion. Now, if I was singing this, merrily we roll along, you might say, okay, you could take a breath there, but that doesn't make it a phrase because harmonically I haven't gone anywhere. I'm sitting out on the one chord. There's no harmonic motion. Okay, and is that a cadence? 1, 1? That's not a cadence, right? If there's no harmonic motion, then that automatically means there's no cadence. Cadence implies that we have some harmonic motion. Okay, so there's no cadence, there's no harmonic motion. The only thing that's, from that list is that there's a little bit of a resting point, a long note. But that doesn't make it a phrase. Okay, but now if I take the first 4 bars, okay, now have I had some harmonic motion at all? Yes, right. I have had 1, 1, 5, 7. It's an inversion, and 1. Okay, so at least I went somewhere harmonically. I didn't hang out on the same thing the whole time. So that could qualify this to be a phrase. And is this a cadence? If I look at these last 2 harmonies, what are they?
IAC.
IAC, I heard IAC. Okay, so I've got, this is 5, 6, 5, if I'm going to be specific. And this is 1. Okay, so it's automatically, I know it's not a PAC because I don't have both in root position. My soprano also does not end on do. So yeah, definitely not a PAC, but it is an IAC. Okay, imperfect authentic cadence. Okay, so I've got a cadence. I've got some harmonic motion. And I also do have a resting point at the end of these 4 bars. So this qualifies to be a phrase. Okay, and then my second phrase is again. What kind of cadence do I end with that second time? Again, we have harmonic motion. You can all see that. What kind of cadence is this? So this is 5. This is 1. Both are in root position. The soprano ends on do. This is a
PAC, ma'am.
PAC, yes. Okay, very good.
Ma'am, how do we know rhythmic resting point in line 1?
Okay, so now we have more than one place where we have a rhythmic resting point, right? We have a longer note, okay, is another way of saying it. So we have to look at other factors, not just that, to determine what is a phrase. Okay, if I was only looking at where there's a rhythmic resting point, I might think after 2 bars could be a phrase. Da, 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 da. Okay, there is a little bit of a resting point there, but the other things don't qualify this to be a phrase. There's no harmonic motion, there's no cadence. So that's not something I would primarily look at to determine phrases. Okay, more important is looking at cadences. If there's one thing to look at when you're determining a phrase, it's where do you see a cadence. That is the clearest. Cadences are almost like punctuation. Okay, if you think about in English, how do you know when you come to the end of a sentence? You have a period, or the middle of a sentence, you have a comma. Okay, commas and periods and punctuation marks show us where sentences and phrases end in English. Okay, similarly in music, cadences are the clearest thing that show us where our phrase ends. So that's what I would look at first. Okay, now when you see a cadence, that also implies harmonic motion. So when I'm talking about harmonic motion, just know that if you ever have something that stays on the same harmony, then technically it's not a phrase. So that's that point. Then the final thing is, you know, usually we feel some sort of a resting point at the end. Now, I'm not saying this is the only resting point. We had some other resting points in the middle of our phrase. But normally, phrases also do end with a longer note or a rest or something that makes us feel rhythmically like it's the end of an idea. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, we are about out of time. So maybe I'll just make one final comment. Okay, somebody brought up the term antecedent and consequent. Let me ask this as our final question, and we'll get back into this tomorrow. Why is this an antecedent and why is this a consequent? So I labeled those here. What makes this an antecedent? What makes this a consequent?
Okay, somebody else.
Go ahead, Reed.
So antecedent is because of the cadence. Okay? Like, so as you can see, the first octave, it's an incomplete authentic cadence. So when it's an like something similar to an incomplete cadence or a plagal cadence or half cadence, then it is called antecedent because it ends at kind of a weak cadence. That's right. And consequent, it's because it ends on a strong cadence, such as the perfect authentic cadence.
Okay, very good. So antecedent and consequent is the relationship between two phrases when one ends with a weaker cadence and the other one ends with a stronger cadence. Okay, and that can often be half cadence followed by an authentic cadence, or it can be imperfect authentic followed by perfect authentic. Those are the most common types of phrases that form an antecedent and consequent relationship. And then there's a word do you remember a word that you learned way back in writing skills for when we have two phrases that have this antecedent consequent relationship? We call it a
Can you give us a hint?
Round
and it's not phrase.
P.
Period. No.
Yes, thank you. Period. Okay, so this is the same idea of antecedent and consequent. So if we have two phrases, one that ends with a weaker cadence and the other one that ends with a stronger cadence, it's like that links them together, the weak, strong cadence relationship. We call these a period. So this is a period. We're going to end with that today. Tomorrow we'll talk about some other terms related to phrases and look at some other examples of phrases, hopefully slightly more interesting than this one. But okay, that is it for today. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep, see you guys tomorrow.